The gravel road through my farm has never been meant for traffic. It's a simple thing, really two narrow ruts pressed into the earth, scattered with river stones and soft dust in the summer, muddy pits in the winter. On both sides, the grass grows tall, flecked with wildflowers that shift in the wind like watercolor brushstrokes. Hawks often dive for rabbits, and sometimes I'd see a deer pausing near the hedgerow to sniff the air. For as long as I can remember, that little lane was mine alone, a passage from the gate to the barn and back, meant for tractors, hay wagons, and the occasional visitor who respected what private property meant. It was quiet, it was steady, it was honest. That changed the day Karen showed up. When she first moved into the subdivision on the hill, I didn't pay her much mind. People come and go, and neighbors are often no more than faces you nod to in passing. But Karen wasn't the kind of woman you could ignore for long. She carried herself like a parade marshal. Chin high, arms always crossed, eyes darting from one imagined flaw to another. She had a way of turning everything into a performance, whether it was picking up her mail, walking her little designer dog, or standing at the HOA meetings she seemed to love presiding over. You could almost see the invisible crown she wore. At first, it was just little jabs. A note slipped into my mailbox saying my gate was unsightly and did not conform to neighborhood aesthetic standards. That was laughable, since my farm predates the subdivision by decades. Another time, she leaned out her car window to complain that my rooster crowed too early. And once when my old shepherd barked at her dog, she honked twice, sharp and insistent, as if my dog were supposed to recognize her authority. I could have brushed those things aside, but then she started using my lane. The first time I saw her silver Mercedes cut across the edge among pasture, I thought she was lost. People take wrong turns. It happens. But instead of slowing down to turn around, she pressed the accelerator, tires scattering gravel, and took the full length of my farm road as though she owned it. She didn't even look in my direction as I stood there, watching her weave past the hedgerow, leaving 2 fresh scars in the earth. I figured it was a one-off mistake. The next morning, the same thing happened. The glint of that chrome girl appeared over the rise at the exact same time, 7:30, sharp. That time, she had a coffee cup balanced in one hand and sunglasses perched on her nose. She didn't so much as wave. By the end of the week, the Mercedes had become a regular sight, humming past like a clock chime, regular and grating. Every pass left its mark. The ruts deepened. Grass that had taken months to grow back after the spring floods was flattened in seconds. Wildflowers, yellow asters, blue chicory, purple vetch, were shredded under her wheels. The gravel I'd paid good money to have hauled in was spat out and scattered. The lane began to look less like a farm track and more like a commuter road, beaten and tired. I tried talking to her. The first time, I caught her as she slowed near the bend where the lane met the main road. I waved her down, kept my voice steady, and explained this was private property. She tilted her sunglasses down and gave me that smile. Tight, thin, a smile meant to dismiss rather than agree. "Oh, it's fine," she said like she was granting me permission. "I'm just cutting through. Saves me 10 minutes. Oh, I says we're allowed access anyway," and then she drove off before I could word in. That night, I wrote a polite note, explained the damage, reminded her it was private land, left it on her porch myself. The next morning, I found it shoved back into my mailbox with a line scrawled across the bottom, "You should be grateful someone's actually using that road." I tried again. Another letter, more formal this time, citing county property lines and rights of way. The response came in the form of her Mercedes crunching across the lane even faster, like she wanted me to hear the defiance. It became routine. I'd be out checking the fence, or carrying a basket of eggs from the henhouse, or hauling tools from the shed, and that metallic hum would drift down the lane. I began to dread it, the buzz of a mosquito near your ear. It wasn't just the sound. It was what it meant. She saw my land not as mine but as hers to use. She saw my protests not as boundaries but as inconveniences. She treated me like an obstacle in her shortcut rather the owner of the ground under her tires. And so I started documenting. At first it was out of frustration, a way to remind myself I wasn't imagining things. I took photos of the tire tracks, fresh grooves cutting into wet soil. I logged the dates and times she passed, sometimes 2, even 3 times in a day. I snapped pictures of the wildflowers before and after, their stems broken, their petals crushed into the mud. Every entry in my notebook felt like a small act of control, a way of reclaiming ownership in the face of her trespass. I also posted signs. Not big, angry ones, just clear, simple notices. No through traffic, emergency vehicles only. I staked them where anyone with a conscience would pause. Karen didn't. I saw her glance at one of the signs once, just long enough for her lips to curl in that smug, amused way, as if I'd put up lawn decor for her entertainment. By then, my patience was wearing thin. The farm wasn't just dirt and fences, it was history, sweat and long hours. Every rut her tires carved into that road felt like a message that none of it mattered. that she could reduce it to convenience with the press of a gas pedal. I tried not to let it get under my skin, but the truth was it did. The hum of that Mercedes became the rhythm of my resentment, steady and impossible to ignore. Still, I didn't lash out. I didn't scream or throw rocks or set traps. I could have stayed quiet, patient. Rules when they benefited her. I believed in rules when they protected me. And I had the time, the records, and the stubbornness to make sure hers wasn't the last laugh. It was only a matter of waiting for the right moment. For her to push just far enough that the farm itself, and the law backing it, would push back. And when that moment came, I knew I'd be ready. Would you like me to also expand scene 2 into around 1,000 words, so the story feels balanced and complete? The rain came in sheets that week, a steady drumming against the tin roof of the barn and the windows of the farmhouse. It wasn't the kind of gentle spring rain that makes the world smell like wet grass and new growth. This was harder, heavier, the kind of storm that pounds the earth until the soil turns to soup and the ruts in a dirt road deepen into trenches. By the second day, my farm lane looked more like a bog than a road. The puddles were wide enough to reflect the gray sky, and the soft earth clung to my boots every time I went out to feed the animals. For me, it was inconvenient. For someone driving a low-slung silver Mercedes, it was a disaster waiting to happen. But I wasn't leaving things to chance. I'd been preparing for this moment for weeks. My folder of evidence had grown fat with photographs, time-stamp logs, and copies of the polite, ignored notices I'd sent. The clerk at the county office had been more helpful than I expected. She had leaned over the counter with a half-smile, tapping the section of the county regulations that spelled things out if a private lane was damaged due to unauthorized use. The landowner had the right to file for cost recovery, to tow trespassers, and even to seek citations for repeated violations. You've got everything you need, she told me. Just follow the steps. So I did. I submitted the forms, attached the photos, stapled receipts for gravel and maintenance. I even included the costs of seed for the wildflowers, because why not? They had been mine, too, before her tires shredded them. I sent a copy of the complaint to the HOA board, another to Karen by certified mail, and one more to the towing company that serviced our area. Even clear, formal language. There was no anger, no sarcasm, nothing she could twist into hostility. Just facts. Just rules. The dictatively didn't like being involved. They sent a half-hearted reply about neighborly cooperation and avoiding unnecessary escalation. But the law didn't bend to their preference for peacekeeping. The county had stamped the notice, and the towing company acknowledged receipt. From that point forward, Karen wasn't just cutting through my land. She was setting herself up for consequences she couldn't argue away. When the rain turned my lane into a quagmire, I didn't have to wonder whether she would come. I knew her habits too well. 7:30 in the morning, grocery bags on the passenger seat, coffee cup in hand, sunglasses perched on her nose like armor against reality. Sure enough, the hum of the Mercedes came faint through the rain. I stood at the window, watching the glint of silver emerge from the mist, and for a moment I almost pitied her. Almost. The car eased onto the lane, tires splashing through the first puddle. From a distance, I could see the moment she realized the ground wasn't what it used to be. She slowed, hesitated, and then did exactly what I expected. She pressed harder on the gas, as though sheer stubbornness could carry her through mud and water. The tires spun, sending up arcs of brown spray. The car rocked forward, then sank deeper into the rut. She tried reversing, but that only dug the wheels further, the mud sucking at the rubber like quicksand. From my pole thing with the patience of a man who had rehearsed this outcome in his mind 100 times. She opened her door once, stepping out in shiny utterly unsuited to the muck. The way she wrinkled her nose at the smell and flailed as her foot sank into the mud might have been comical if it weren't so fitting. She got back in, slammed the door, and made a call on her phone. It wasn't long before I heard the rumble of a larger engine. The tow truck came the rain, pulling up just shy of where the Mercedes lay stranded. The driver climbed out, pulling his cap lower against the drizzle. He looked at me, then at the car, then back at me again. I held up the signed paperwork, dry inside a plastic sleeve. He nodded. That was all it took. Karen's face, when she realized what was happening, was a study in outrage. She leapt out of the car again, umbrella in one hand, phone in the other, barking into it while pointing at the driver. I couldn't hear every word over the rain, but the gist was clear. She believed this was illegal, unfair, beneath her. She kept throwing around phrases like property rights and HOA jurisdiction, her voice rising higher with every sentence. The driver, unbothered, clipped chains to her car and began winching it out of the mud. You can't do this, she shouted at me across the distance. You can't just take someone's car because you don't like them. I raised my voice just enough to carry over the storm. It's not because I don't like you. It's because you've been trespassing. The county signed off on it. That silenced her for a moment, but only a moment. She turned her fury on the driver again, demanding his name, his supervisor, threatening lawsuits. He simply shrugged, kept working, and told her she could take it up with the office. He'd heard it all before. By the time the Mercedes was hauled free, its once pristine exterior was spattered with mud, streaked down the doors, clumped around the tires. It was no longer a gleaming symbol of superiority. It looked like what it was, a car that didn't belong where it was. The driver hooked it up, signed the form I handed him, and prepared to tow it off the property. Karen stood in the rain, sputtering. Her umbrella half collapsed, her voice breaking with disbelief. For the first time, she had no control. The bill went to her. So did the citation, mailed later with the county's letterhead and official seal. There would be fines and paperwork, and no easy escape through charm or intimidation. She couldn't argue with mud, couldn't bend regulations that were written in plain black ink. She'd driven herself into this corner, and now she had to pay her way out of it. When the tow truck disappeared down the road, the sound of its engine fading into the storm, I finally allowed myself a long breath. It wasn't triumph I felt. At least not the loud, gloating kind. It was relief. A deep, steady satisfaction that the rules had worked, that patience had paid off, that my land meant something again. The lane, scarred and messy, would need repair. I'd have gravel brought in, smooth the ruts, plant wildflower seed along the edges once the ground dried. In time, it would heal. And this time, I knew it would stay healed. Karen wouldn't be back. Not with the cost fresh in her memory, not with the HOA forced to admit the county had sided with me. I went back inside, hung my wet coat, poured myself a cup of tea, and sat by the window to watch the rain. For the first time in weeks, the farm felt quiet again. No hum of an unwanted engine, no flash of chrome cutting across the land. Just the sound of water. Steady and cleansing, washing away the last of her entitlement. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive in grand gestures. Sometimes it comes with a stamp, a signature, and a tow truck pulling away in the rain. It doesn't shout. It doesn't gloat. It simply restores balance. And for me, that was more than enough.